The air in the delivery room was still thick with the miracle of it all. Eight perfect tiny daughters, their cries filling the space with a chaotic, beautiful symphony of life. My body felt like a distant, aching shoreline after a storm, but my heart was full. I had done it. We had done it. I looked at my husband, Ethan, expecting to see the same exhaustion and awe reflected in his eyes. Instead, I saw a chilling stillness. His face was a blank canvas, wiped clean of all emotion. "Nathan," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Aren't they beautiful?" NHE didn't look at the incubators. He didn't look at the nurses. He looked directly at me, his gaze as cold and hard as granite. "The doctor said you're cleared to be discharged in 2 days." And it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a countdown. "Yes," I said, a knot of confusion tightening in my chest. "We'll need to get the van ready. Can you believe it? 8 car seats. And you'll need to get your van ready." He corrected me, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "When you are discharged from this hospital, you are not to come home. You are to pack your things, take them, and leave." NTHE words hung in the air, so cruel and nonsensical that my mind couldn't process them at first. It felt like he was speaking a foreign language. "Leave? What are you talking about, Ethan? Leave and go where?" "Our home it is no longer your home," he stated, his voice unwavering. "I will not raise a house full of failures. I will not have my legacy be a footnote in a story about the man with 8 daughters and no son. My decision is final." And a nurse, who had overheard, gasped and took a step forward. Ethan shot her a look so venomous she froze. He then turned his back on me, on the 8 children we had just brought into the world, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. The order was delivered with the cold, impersonal finality of a judge passing a death sentence. I was left in the sterile silence, the cries of my newborns suddenly sounding like sirens. 2 days. I had 2 days until I would be homeless. My body was broken from childbirth, and my 8 brand new daughters, so fragile they could fit in the palm of my hand, had no roof to go to, no father's arms to welcome them. He hadn't just rejected me, he had evicted his own flesh and blood from their lives before they had even had a chance to live them. NHEY. Everyone, if this story is already hitting you hard, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is everything. Now let's uncover how a man could do something so monstrous. The foundation of a lean Ethan was my rock, or so I thought. We met when I was catering a corporate event for the construction company he had inherited from his father. He wasn't like the other executives in sharp suits. He had calluses on his hands and sawdust on his boots. He spoke of buildings not as investments, but as living things. He talked about legacy, about building things that would last for generations, about honoring the Carter family name that was stamped on half the buildings in the city. NHE was strong, steady, and traditional. He courted me with an old-fashioned sincerity that felt safe and real. He told me he wanted a partner to build a life with, a woman who understood the value of family and tradition. I, a chef who poured my heart into feeding people, felt like I had found my counterpart, a man who built the homes that I would fill with warmth. NHI's obsession with having a son was woven into the very fabric of his identity. It wasn't just a preference. It was a non-negotiable part of the Carter legacy. The company was Carter & Sons Construction, a name that had been passed down for 3 generations. He spoke of his future son as if he already existed, a boy he would teach to read blueprints, to pour concrete, to carry on the family name. When our first daughter Olivia was born, he was a good father, but there was a subtle distance in his eyes. He loved her, I think, but he saw her as a prelude, the opening act before the main event. "She'll make a great older sister for her little brother one day," he'd say, smiling. Then came our twin girls, Sophia and Isabel. His smile became tighter. The distance in his eyes grew. He started spending more time at the office, his excuse always being that he needed to, quote, secure their future. But I knew he was running from a home that was becoming a constant reminder of his perceived failure. He wasn't cruel or abusive. His disappointment was a quiet, suffocating pressure, a foundation of instability being laid beneath our seemingly perfect life. The pregnancy with octuplets was a medical shockwave. Ethan's reaction was one of grim determination. He saw it as his last, best chance to fulfill his destiny. He became a project manager for my pregnancy, monitoring my health not out of love, but out of a desperate need for a specific outcome. He never asked how I felt. He asked what the doctors said. He was building a house of cards, and he needed one of them to be a king, and I see now that he was never my rock. His love was conditional, his stability an illusion. He wasn't building a family with me. He was trying to construct a legacy. And when I failed to provide him with the one component he deemed essential, he decided to demolish the entire structure, with us still inside. NA shelter and the storm NTHE, 2 days in the hospital, were the longest of my life. I was trapped in a state of suspended terror. Every time a nurse came in, I expected her to tell me my time was up. I called Ethan's phone until it went dead. I called his family, but they were a wall of cold loyalty to their son. Ethan is a practical man, his mother told me, her voice devoid of sympathy. He has made his decision, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. And on the morning of my discharge, a nurse named Maria came into my room. She was an older woman with kind eyes who had been quietly watching me for 2 days. She closed the door behind her. "I have a sister," she said, her voice low. "She runs a small, private shelter for women. It's not much, but it's safe, it's clean. And it's a roof." Tears streamed down my face, the first I had allowed myself to cry since he had walked out. I was a successful chef, a partner in a beautiful home, and I was about to become a resident of a homeless shelter. Maria held my hand, her grip firm. "You are a mother of 9 now," she said, looking at my 3 older daughters who had just arrived with my parents. "You are stronger than you think. Let people help you." And MY parents, heartbroken and furious, helped me pack. We loaded the 8 tiny, fragile babies into the van. I drove away from the hospital, not towards the beautiful home I had helped design, but towards an unknown address, an uncertain future. My newborns had no roof, no father's arms. All they had was me. NTHE shelter was a small, unassuming house on a quiet street. It was run by a woman named Elena, Maria's sister, whose warmth was a balm on my raw nerves. She showed me to a small, clean room with 2 beds and a row of bassinets she had managed to find. This tiny room would be home for me and my 9 daughters. NTHAT night, as my children slept, the sheer weight of my reality crashed down on me. I had nothing. My bank accounts, which were joint with Ethan, had been emptied. My credit cards were canceled. The home I owned was in his name. The man I had loved and built a life with had systematically and efficiently erased me. He hadn't just thrown me out, he had stripped me bare, leaving me with nothing but the children he considered worthless. Lying in that narrow bed, listening to the soft breathing of my 9 girls, I felt a shift. The fear didn't disappear, but it made room for something else, a cold, hard resolve. He thought he had discarded me like a piece of trash. He thought I would crumble. He had built his entire life on the idea of a legacy of stone and steel. I would build mine on something far stronger, the unbreakable spirit of a mother protecting her children. He wanted to erase us. I would make sure he could never forget our names. The recipe for revenge in life in the shelter was a lesson in humility and strength. The other women there, each with their own story of heartbreak and survival, became my family. They taught me how to navigate the world as a single mother with no resources. They held my babies while I showered, they shared their food when mine was running low, and they listened without judgment. NMY salvation came in the one thing that had always been mine, my cooking. The shelter had a small, under-equipped kitchen, but to me, it was a sanctuary. I started cooking for the residents, turning donated ingredients into delicious, nourishing meals. The simple act of feeding people, of creating something beautiful out of scraps, began to heal a small part of my broken soul. Nelena saw my talent. "You have a gift, Sarah," she said one evening, after a meal that had brought a rare moment of joy to the tired faces around the table. "You shouldn't be hiding it here." With Elena's encouragement, I started a small, under-the-table catering business out of the shelter's kitchen. I made lunches for local offices, baked cakes for birthdays, and catered small parties. My clients didn't know my story. They just knew my food was incredible. I saved every single dollar, hiding the cash in a shoebox under my bed. It was a slow, painstaking process, but with every dollar, I was buying back a piece of my independence. My older daughters watched me, their young faces serious. They helped where they could, setting tables, washing vegetables, watching their younger sisters. They were learning a lesson no school could teach them, a lesson in resilience, hard work, and the power of a woman to rebuild her life from the ashes. And after a year, I had saved enough for a deposit on a small, run-down storefront in a forgotten part of town. It was a huge risk. It was every penny I had. The space was a disaster, with peeling paint and faulty wiring, but it had a kitchen. It was a start. The women from the shelter, my new family, helped me clean it, paint it, and bring it back to life, and I named it the 9th Plate in honor of my 9 daughters. It started as a small takeout counter, but my reputation grew. People came for the food, but they stayed for the story, which I eventually began to share. I was the chef who had been left with nothing and had built a business from scratch. I was a symbol of survival. My restaurant became more than just a place to eat. It became a community hub, a place of hope, and all the while, I was planning. Every dish I served, every dollar I earned, was a step in a much larger plan, a plan to reclaim the life that Ethan had stolen from me, and a new foundation years passed. The 9th Plat became a local institution. I expanded, opening a full-service restaurant, then a second location. I was no longer the homeless woman from the shelter. I was one of the city's most celebrated chefs and business owners. I had built my own legacy, not of concrete, but of community and incredible food. NMY daughters grew up in the warmth of the restaurant's kitchen. They were smart, strong, and fiercely loyal. They knew their father's story, not as a source of shame, but as the catalyst for our strength. Olivia, my eldest, showed a keen business sense. Sophia had a flair for marketing, and Isabel, a passion for culinary arts. They were the future of my growing empire, and I never took a dime from Ethan. I had filed for divorce, of course, and the courts had ordered him to pay a laughably small amount of child support, which he paid begrudgingly. I never cashed the checks. I pinned them to a corkboard in my office, a wall of reminders of his pathetic attempt to buy a clear conscience. I didn't want his money. I wanted justice. NMY lawyers had told me that challenging him for a share of his company was nearly impossible. The business was ironclad, passed down through generations, and my name was on nothing. But I wasn't interested in his company. I was interested in his reputation, the one thing he valued more than anything. And I began to quietly invest in real estate, buying up small, neglected properties around the city. I used my knowledge as a chef to see the potential in forgotten neighborhoods, opening smaller cafes and bistros that revitalized the areas. I was becoming a developer in my own right, my name associated with growth and community. NTHE final piece of my plan fell into place when a large, historic building in the center of the city's old town went up for sale. It was the Old City Market, a beautiful but derelict structure that had been vacant for decades. It was a landmark, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that Ethan and his company would want it. It was a legacy project, the kind of thing he couldn't resist. This would be our battleground. The bidding Warren THE battle for the Old City Market became the talk of the town. It was a David versus Goliath story. On one side was Carter & Sons Construction, the oldest and most powerful firm in the city, a symbol of old money and tradition. On the other side was me, the celebrated local chef-turned-developer, a symbol of new wave, community-focused growth. No one in the public knew our history. They just saw a fascinating business rivalry. Ethan was furious. He saw my bid as a personal affront, an upstart chef treading on his territory. He couldn't comprehend that I had the resources or the audacity to challenge him. The bidding process was public, held in the city council chambers. It was the hottest ticket in town, and I walked into that chamber with my 3 eldest daughters by my side. They were young women now, poised and confident. Ethan was there, flanked by his lawyers. When he saw me, his face tightened into a mask of contempt. He didn't see the mother of his children. He saw an obstacle. NTHE bidding was fierce. He would raise, and I would counter, my voice calm and steady. The price climbed higher and higher, far beyond the building's actual value. But this wasn't about value. It was about principle. It was about a man who had thrown his family out onto the street, and the woman who had clawed her way back to face him. Finally, the price reached a staggering number. The auctioneer looked at Ethan. He was sweating, his face red. He had reached his limit. He looked at me, his eyes full of hatred, and shook his head. "Sold!" the auctioneer cried, his gavel coming down with a deafening crack. To Sarah Carter and the Ninth Plate Group, NTHE room erupted in applause. I had won. I had beaten him at his own game. As I stood to accept the congratulations, I caught his eye. The look on his face was not just anger. It was disbelief. It was the look of a man whose entire worldview had been shattered. The woman he had deemed worthless had just publicly defeated him. In the unveiling NTHE renovation of the old city market took 2 years. It was my masterpiece. I didn't just restore the building. I reimagined it. It became a vibrant food hall, a hub for local artisans, a culinary school, and a community event space. At the very heart of the market, I built a state-of-the-art kitchen and a nonprofit organization that would provide culinary training and job placement for homeless women and single mothers. I named it the Maria and Elena Project, in honor of the 2 women who had saved me. NTHE grand opening was the biggest event the city had seen in years. The press was there, the mayor was there, the entire city seemed to be celebrating with me. I stood on a stage in the center of the bustling market, my 9 daughters standing beside me, ranging from accomplished young women to vibrant teenagers, and I gave my speech, thanking the community for their support. And then I did something no one expected. "Many of you know me as a chef and a businesswoman," I said, my voice ringing through the hall. But my story started a long time ago, when I became the mother to 9 incredible daughters. On the day my 8 youngest were born, their father, Ethan Carter of Carter & Sons Construction, ordered me and his newborn children out of our home. A shocked silence fell over the crowd. People turned to look at the back of the hall, where I knew Ethan was standing, unable to resist seeing my moment of triumph. "And I tell you this not for pity," I continued, my voice strong and clear. "I tell you this because this building is a testament to the fact that a legacy is not built with brick and mortar. It is not found in a family name or the gender of your children. A true legacy is built with love, with resilience, and with the community you lift up along with you. This market is dedicated to every woman who has ever been told she is worthless, to every child who has ever been abandoned. It is proof that from the deepest despair, you can build something beautiful." And I looked towards the back of the hall and met his eyes. He was pale, his face a mask of horror and public humiliation. He had spent his life obsessed with his name, his reputation, and I had just redefined it for him, forever. He would no longer be known as the city's great builder. He would be known as the man who threw his 9 daughters out onto the street. The true legacy, Ethan's public shaming, was swift and brutal. Clients began to pull their contracts. His business partners, fearing the stain on their own reputations, distanced themselves. The Carter & Sons name, once a symbol of strength, was now a symbol of shame. His company, his life's work, began to crumble under the weight of the truth, and I never spoke to him again. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't in his destruction, but in my creation. My legacy was not one of revenge, but of resilience. NMY daughters grew into remarkable women. They ran the restaurants, managed the foundation, and continued to build our community. They were living proof of his catastrophic miscalculation. He had thrown away a fortune of love, talent, and loyalty because he was blinded by a prejudice as old as time. Sometimes I walk through the bustling city market, now named the Carter Market, my name, not his. I see the families, I hear the laughter, I watch the students in my culinary school learning to build their own futures. I think of that terrified woman in the hospital, facing a future with no roof and no hope. And I think of the man who put her there. NHE wanted a son to carry on his name. Instead, he got 9 daughters and a mother who built an empire that would overshadow his for generations. He had ordered us out of his house, but we had ended up building a home for an entire city. And that was a legacy he could never tear down.